In 2011, experienced hiker Tom Nichols vanished in the Bitterroot Mountains, leaving behind only a boot, a collapsed tent, and a burned scrap of paper that read, "Watched." For years, authorities dismissed his case as a tragic accident, ignoring strange clues, sealed evidence, and his sister Julie's desperate warnings that someone was out there. But 12 years later, a sealed VHS tape surfaced in a closed post office locker, and on it, Tom left a message that changed everything. What he said in those final 6 minutes turned a missing persons case into a terrifying revelation. And now, the full truth is finally ready to be told. On the morning of June 4th, 2011, Tom Nichols signed the trailhead logbook at Pinecrest Station. He was 41, an experienced hiker with more than 20 years of wilderness treks behind him. The route he chose was Copperhead Ridge, a grueling 3-day loop winding through the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho, known for its dramatic altitude shifts, rapid weather changes, and sparse cell coverage. The forecast was clear: 56 degrees, calm winds, barometric pressure steady. His pack weighed 45 pounds and included a Garmin Jeeps Map 60 CSX, which would later become a central piece of the timeline. According to the time-stamped ping logs recovered later, Tom made solid progress that first day. By noon, he had already covered 7 miles of sharp ascent. The final GPS ping came at 3:14 p.m., just past Devil's Lookout, a ridge notorious for its sweeping views and perilous cliffs. After that, nothing. The signal went dark. No emergency alerts, no distress calls. That evening, Tom's sister Julie received a text message, short and routine. Made it halfway. "We'll lose signal soon. See you Monday." She didn't worry, not yet. Tom had done this dozens of times. He always came back, but Monday passed. Then Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, June 8th at 5:21 p.m., the silence was too loud to ignore. Julie called 911. "My brother. He went into the Bitterroots on Saturday and hasn't come back. He was supposed to be home Monday." The dispatcher collected the details: name, age, destination, whether he was alone. Within the hour, search and rescue teams from the Forest Service were activated. By 7:58 p.m., the first team reached the trailhead. Tom's car, a 1998 Subaru Outback, was parked exactly where he said it would be. The windows were rolled up. A gas receipt on the dashboard showed a final timestamp, 6:01 a.m., June 4th, from a station in Salmon, Idaho. The contents inside were ordinary. A paperback book, a trail map, some snacks. Nothing pointed to trouble, no signs of a break-in, no blood, no struggle. By 10 p.m., teams had begun sweeping the first miles of trail. The temperature was falling quickly, into the 30s, and visibility dropped with every passing hour. Ranger Ben Alden radioed in at 10:43 p.m. Found flattened grass, could be old camp, no fire ring, could be Nichols, could be another hiker, continuing east. At midnight, search was called off due to darkness. One red X marked the operational map. Last GPS ping, 3:14 p.m., June 4th, Devil's Lookout. The position was strange. The GPS dropped under clear skies, no heavy canopy, no steep gorge to interfere. It was as if the device had simply gone silent. His last known coordinates sat on a ridge with wide open skies. Theories began forming quickly, but nothing conclusive. The next morning would bring more boots on the ground, 20 volunteers from Boise and surrounding towns. But that night, the mountain had swallowed Tom Nichols whole. The only trace discovered before dawn was a faint footprint, size 11, drying in the mud near a stream bend, half a mile off trail. And just 200 feet from that, someone had built a small rock cairn. It wasn't a trail marker. It looked fresh, intentional. A message, a signal. No one could say. At 2:17 a.m., the final radio check-in crackled back to command. No sign of Nichols, returning to base. No one knew, not yet, that 12 years later, in a shuttered post office far from the forest, someone would unlock a forgotten metal locker. Inside it, a single sealed envelope, a VHS tape. Labeled only with 7 words, to be opened only if found. Tom Nichols had vanished, but he had not gone silent forever. By sunrise on June 9th, 2011, The search for Tom Nichols had entered its most critical phase, the first 48 hours after a disappearance, what investigators call the golden window. During this time, chances of recovery are at their highest. But even in those early morning hours, veteran rescuers knew the terrain was already against them. The Bitterroot Mountains, with their steep ravines, erratic rivers, and craggy ridgelines, presented a cruel and unforgiving theater. Incident Commander Lana Moretti divided the target area into 5 overlapping zones, each spiraling outward from the last confirmed GPS ping at Devil's Lookout, a wind-battered ridge perched above a 2,000-foot drop. Snow lingered in the shadows, and the ground was still wet from spring thaw. They had the weather on their side, cloudless skies, a steady 56 degrees, but time was bleeding away. The first teams moved fast, checking overhangs, game trails, and runoff basins. Dogs from Missoula's K-9 Rescue Division were brought in and sniffed around the cairn and the size 11 footprint discovered the night before. But the scent was inconsistent, disrupted, possibly by wind or something else. At the same time, back at Pine Crest Ranger Station, a dispatcher was pulling the original 911 call for review. It had come in at 5:21 p.m. the day before. Julie Nichols, Tom's sister, had sounded calm at first, measured, but under the surface was panic. "My brother. He went into the Bitterroots on Saturday and hasn't come back. He was supposed to be home Monday." "Was he alone?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes, always." "Do you know which trail?" "Copperhead Ridge Loop. He said he wanted to clear Devil's Lookout by day 1. The dispatcher logged the details and ended the call with a promise. Help was already on the way. Julie's final words were quiet, barely above a whisper. "Please find him, please." By 1:30 p.m., helicopters were in the air. The Westcam MX-10 thermal imaging system swept the forest from 8,000 feet, its sensors tuned to pick up any heat signature from a human body. But the scans came back cold, no movement, no anomalies. Then, at 3:42 p.m., searchers made their first significant find. Downstream from the last ping point, tucked between 2 granite boulders, lay Tom's tent, collapsed, its rainfly half peeled back, pinned beneath a rock slide that appeared natural. One of his boots was inside, damp but intact. The other had drifted 20 feet downstream, caught in a tangle of willow branches. But there was no sign of his pack. His phone was missing. The tent was otherwise empty, except for a single object in the mesh pocket, a 1989 silver coin, untarnished, gleaming. It was a detail that unsettled even the most experienced of the crew. The coin was bagged, photographed, and logged as item Shear TN04. No fingerprints were recovered. It looked placed. By nightfall, 74 personnel were combing the area, and news of Tom's disappearance had started circulating across state lines. One article called him a seasoned adventurer lost in his own backyard. Another used the phrase that would stick, "vanished without a trace." But that wasn't quite true. At 7:58 p.m., a ranger radioed in with an alarming discovery. "Found second fire ring, recent, burned paper inside. Partial word visible, UATCHED, requesting evidence collection." The message electrified the team. What had he written? Or had someone else written it? There was no blood, no drag marks, no obvious sign of a struggle. And yet, a picture was beginning to form. A trail with pieces deliberately left behind, or perhaps pieces someone else wanted found. By 10:11 p.m., the daily operations report stated clearly, Nichols' tent found, 1 boot recovered, thermal scans negative, evidence of secondary fire, no body, no active signal, missing person status, elevated to critical. As the sun dropped below the peaks, the last of the light hit Devil's Lookout like a spotlight. That's where Tom had last been. That's where his signal had died. And though the night grew still, something about the ridge now felt watched, as if someone, or something, had been there the whole time. The search would continue. But now it was no longer just about finding a lost hiker. It was about deciphering a message no one yet understood. If your family went missing, would you stop searching after 48 hours? Comment hope if you'd search forever. By the morning of June 10th, 2011, the search for Tom Nichols had already drawn attention far beyond the state of Idaho. As more time passed without a sighting, the effort expanded, in both scale and desperation. What had begun as a focused mission around Devil's Lookout was now ballooning outward into dozens of square miles of rugged backcountry. Officials reclassified the operation from search and rescue to full-terrain deployment. Helicopters were grounded due to high winds sweeping in from the west. Without air support, ground teams pushed deeper. Volunteer groups were now arriving from 4 counties, some carrying laminated maps, others simply with water and hope. Among them were retired climbers, off-duty park rangers, even a former SAR technician who had driven overnight from Coeur d'Alene. Everyone felt it, the growing need not just to help, but to solve something that didn't feel like a typical wilderness disappearance. Search Command established a new base 5 miles closer to the ridge. A semi-permanent tent city grew beside the trailhead, complete with medical tents, field kitchens, and a running log of every square foot covered. They brought in additional FLIR-equipped drones, the DJI Matrice 600 Pro, fitted with FLIR View Pro R thermal sensors. But again, the mountain yielded nothing. No heat signatures, no movement, no signs of life. At 11:13 a.m., searchers discovered something strange just beyond Zone C4, where the tree line thins and the terrain becomes shale and ice. A single torn photograph. It was folded in half and tucked between stones, as if deliberately placed. It showed Tom as a child, maybe 7 or 8, sitting on a porch with his mother. The back was smudged but legible. June 1980. See you soon. The photo hadn't been there before, not on the previous day's sweep. They flagged the location. GPS marker logged 46.120 again 114.4482 W. The paper was dry, not weathered, like it had been left that morning. Back at base, Julie Nichols was informed. Her response was immediate and chilling. That photo was in his bedroom drawer. It's not something he'd carry, not into the mountains. By afternoon, national news crews had arrived. A camera truck from KTVB Boise, a stringer from the Associated Press. Word spread of a missing man, a burned note that read, "Watched," and now a photo that shouldn't be there. A brief clip aired that evening on the local news. The search for 41-year-old Tom Nichols, now entering its 6th day, has grown to over 100 personnel. Investigators are now pursuing possible leads, suggesting human involvement in the hiker's disappearance. This statement marked a turning point. Until now, the assumption had been accidental injury, a fall, a misstep. But now the sheriff's department quietly began coordinating with state authorities. They wouldn't say it publicly, but internally, the word abduction had entered the discussion. At 5:27 p.m., a new discovery shook the team. A second silver coin, identical to the one found in the tent, lay balanced perfectly on a tree stump half a mile away. 1989 mint, no prints. This one was warm to the touch, despite the cool forest shade. The stump itself had been carved, a single crude circle with a line through it. No one recognized the symbol. It was documented, photographed, and bagged as item Jochen TN11. Later that night, a volunteer from Twin Falls reported hearing what sounded like distant breathing, rhythmic, mechanical, possibly human, just beyond the eastern perimeter of the search zone. When teams arrived, they found nothing. No animal tracks, no campers, just the sound of wind through pine. That night, searchers huddled around fires, quiet and alert. Something had shifted. No longer was this just a case of a man lost in the wilderness. Now it felt as if the wilderness was participating, moving pieces, leaving objects, changing the rules. The official report that evening closed with a single line. Search perimeter expanded to 12 square miles. No contact, no signals. Subject remains missing. But everyone knew. Someone had moved that photo, someone had placed that coin, and someone, possibly even now, was still watching from the trees. By June 11th, 2011, 1 full week since Tom Nichols vanished, the case had officially gone national. What began as a backcountry rescue was now a media circus. Satellite vans lined the gravel road to Pine Crest, and reporters from Dateline, CNN, and Outside Magazine hovered around the perimeter of the search camp, asking the same 3 questions. Where is Tom? Why those objects? And who's leaving them behind? The Nichols family held a short, somber press appearance that morning. Julie stood at the podium, flanked by two cousins and her husband. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. My brother is not careless. He is not reckless. If he could come back, he already would have. We are begging anyone who saw him or saw something in those woods to come forward. The local sheriff's office, now coordinating with the Idaho Bureau of Investigation, doubled the reward fund for tips, $25,000. A phone number and email tip line were opened. Within hours, calls started pouring in. Some were dead ends, others stranger. One man from Missoula claimed he'd seen a figure moving through the woods 3 days prior, alone, barefoot, and watching me from behind a birch tree. Another caller, who refused to leave a name, said only, "He's not missing. He's being kept." But one tip stood out. A woman named Carla Denton, 61, from Hamilton, Montana, said she had met a man who looked like Tom at a gas station on June 6th, the day after he was supposed to return. She described him in detail, gaunt, dirt-smeared, wide-eyed. Said he paid in cash for a single bottle of water and stood staring at a map for 10 minutes without saying a word. When asked if she was certain, she replied, "I'd bet my life on it." Investigators reviewed security footage, but the camera at that pump had malfunctioned. No footage, no timestamp, just Carla's story. Still, her description matched Tom down to the mole on his left cheek. Was it possible he had made it out and then vanished again? Back at the search zone, another disturbing detail emerged. A third coin, again 1989 mint. Again left in plain sight, this time balanced on a ridge of stone above a shallow cave, half a mile from the fire ring where the word "watched" had been burned into paper. The cave itself was empty, dry, but deep inside, a small patch of moss had been scraped away. A faint X had been etched into the dirt floor. Nearby, a searcher found a makeshift alarm system, a tripwire made from fishing line and tin tabs, rigged to jingle if triggered. It had already been tripped. Someone had been staying there, or was still staying there. The sheriff ordered wildlife cameras installed around the site. Motion-activated, infrared-capable, silent. They would capture anything, or anyone, returning. Meanwhile, a veteran SAR team member, Miguel Torres, shared something he'd kept quiet until now. 2 days earlier, while hiking the eastern slope, he'd found a pair of boot prints that didn't match Tom's. Too wide, too short. At first, he'd chalked it up to another volunteer. But the tread pattern? Custom. Vibram outsole. Not standard issue. Not in any ranger log. That meant someone else had been up there. Someone not part of the official effort. And someone who didn't want to be seen. The media frenzy intensified. Every hour brought new theories. Serial abductor, forest cult, paranoid delusion. Online forums lit up. Reddit threads ballooned. One headline read, "The trail went cold, then got warm again." That night, at 10:02 p.m., a motion camera triggered near the cave. The photo showed nothing clear, just blur and light. A vertical smudge, like a person passing too close. No face, no figure, just movement. The next frame, empty forest. As darkness settled over the Bitterroots, searchers sat in silence. Radios buzzed quietly. Julie Nichols sat outside her tent, eyes locked on the tree line, whispering something to herself. A single sentence, over and over. He's trying to come home. But if that were true, the question no one wanted to ask was, who was trying to stop him? By late June 2011, the chatter surrounding Tom Nichols' disappearance had all but vanished from major headlines. What was once a wildfire of public interest, daily news coverage, and amateur sleuthing, slowly dissolved into background noise. Yet for those who had walked the ridgelines, scoured creek beds, and slept under tarps in the cold breath of the Bitterroots, the case hadn't faded. It had simply grown quiet. The command tents came down first, then the floodlights, then the mobile field unit's antenna was lowered and packed. Pinecrest Ranger Station, which had served as the central nervous system of the operation, returned to its normal pace. Check-ins from campers, weather updates, occasional bear warnings. The wide maps of the Devil's Lookout grid were rolled and archived. The black and white photos of the 3 silver coins, the burned note fragment, and the childhood photo were filed away, carefully, clinically. The words on the final status report said it plainly: no new leads, transitioning to passive case management. Julie Nichols didn't attend that meeting. She refused. Instead, she stayed on site with a cot in the back of her Subaru, a portable coffee burner, and a folding table covered in hand-marked topographic maps. She wasn't trained in search and rescue. She didn't care. She returned to the trail every day, retracing routes already combed, alone, with a flashlight, even after sunset. She told a local journalist later, "I couldn't leave if he was still out there. I couldn't let them erase him with paperwork." Over the next year, she became the nucleus of a small but unrelenting orbit of volunteers, people drawn not just by Tom's mystery, but by something in the air around the story, something incomplete, something that refused to settle. The official line from the sheriff's department was sterile. No foul play confirmed. Search inconclusive. Status missing. But internally, a handful of deputies privately admitted to something they couldn't quite name: a gnawing discomfort, the placement of the coins, the photo that should have never been in the forest, the burned word watched. These weren't the footprints of an accident. In early 2012, Julie launched findtomnow.org, a sparse but determined website. It featured a high-resolution photo of Tom at age 41, GPS coordinates of the last ping, a rolling log of reported sightings, and a message board that soon filled with speculation. Most posts were sympathetic. Some were bizarre. A man from Ontario claimed to have seen Tom in a dream. Another, from rural Utah, claimed he'd found a coin placed on the hood of his car after camping alone. Same mint year, 1989. Julie began documenting every tip, no matter how improbable. She collected and color-coded them by region. By month 2, she had 62 entries. None were confirmed. Meanwhile, the physical evidence sat in a temperature-controlled locker at the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office. Case file, ID FR0149. Inside were 3 1989 silver coins, each recovered at different elevations. One burned paper fragment with the word watched, partially legible. A Polaroid photograph, origin unknown, verified by family as from Tom's childhood bedroom. A boot, size 11, consistent with Nichols' known gear. The tent collapsed, with minor tears and water staining. In 2013, Julie submitted an official request to have the items re-examined using newer forensic scanning equipment. The request was denied. "No chain of custody justification for reprocessing," the reply read. She didn't stop. In fact, she escalated. She began giving talks at university criminology programs. She wrote op-eds. She appeared on regional podcasts and Reddit AMAs. In every interview, she repeated the same plea: "I don't want a theory, I want a trail." And once, in a segment that aired late at night on a local cable channel, she said something that would stick in people's minds. Someone used the wilderness to hide something. I don't know if they were hiding Tom or themselves. That quote made it into an investigative piece by Highline Northwest, a long-form digital magazine, which reignited public interest briefly in 2015. The article, titled "The Man Who Left Clues in the Trees," drew over 300,000 views in its first week. The comments section exploded. Readers shared maps, pulled trail coordinates, and began tracing their own overlay routes on Google Earth. Then, in May of 2016, 5 years to the month after Tom disappeared, a maintenance crew clearing a fallen tree near the northeast edge of the Copperhead Trail system stumbled on something that hadn't been noticed before. Beneath a rotted birch stump, half buried in wet soil, was a cut piece of hiking strap, heavy-duty nylon, still stiff, despite years of exposure. On the underside, in permanent ink, now faded but still legible, were 5 characters: Tom X3. When asked why they hadn't found it earlier, the ranger overseeing that section replied simply, "We never cut that deep before. The tree fell last winter. It exposed the roots." The strap was mailed to Ravalli County, labeled Item TN 23. No fingerprints, no blood. But the ink. It matched the type used in the notebook Tom had left behind on a prior hiking trip in 2009. the only documented instance of him ever writing his name in shorthand as Tom X3. Julie was notified, but not given access. In the absence of new evidence, public curiosity dwindled again. By 2017, even some of the volunteers had let go. One of them, a retired SAR medic named Wayne Sanders, left a voicemail for Julie before deleting his Reddit account. "I believe you. I can't keep dreaming about that damn ridge." But Julie stayed. She returned to Pinecrest every year, always on June 4th. She left 3 things at the Devil's Lookout marker each time: a thermos of coffee, Tom's favorite, a trail coin of her own, and a letter. Sealed, addressed only, "If you can." No one ever found them the next day. By the time the 10th anniversary came in 2021, the case was considered a regional legend. College forums debated it, conspiracy sites recycled it, but something real reawakened that summer. At the memorial event, filmed and streamed live for the first time, Julie read Tom's last text aloud. Her voice cracked only once. Then, she looked directly into the lens and said, "I don't believe this was nature. I believe this was engineered, and I believe someone is hoping we'll stay quiet." The clip went viral, over 2 million views in 6 days. Dozens of new tips came in. Some were pranks, but one wasn't, though no one realized it yet. Because somewhere in a decommissioned federal post office, 83 miles from the trailhead, a steel locker was being marked for final clearance. Inside was a VHS tape, still sealed, labeled in thick black ink, to be opened only if found. For 12 years, the story of Tom Nichols lived like an unanswered question in the minds of those who knew him, loved him, or simply heard the whisper of his name drift through forums, dispatch records, or mountain trails. He had gone into the Bitterroot Mountains for what should have been a 3-day hike. A man alone, experienced, confident, familiar with every twist of Copperhead Ridge. He left behind nothing but a collapsed tent, a lone boot, 3 silver coins placed like breadcrumbs, and a final message that only made the mystery deeper. When the VHS tape surfaced in 2023, it should have been the beginning of a new investigation. But instead, it became the bookend. A 6-minute monologue, shaken, exhausted, spoken in fear by a man who no longer trusted the world outside his cabin walls. "They followed me from the ridge. They don't make noise like people do, and I don't think they want me to leave." That line echoed across media networks, podcasts, and message boards like a foghorn across still water. Suddenly, all the strange fragments, the coin, the tripwire, the photo that shouldn't have been in the woods, they weren't just artifacts. They were warnings. The Idaho Bureau of Investigation never disclosed how the tape arrived in Locker 184. No fingerprints were found. The internal USPS logs for the Emory Junction facility had long since been destroyed. Surveillance footage had never existed. The cameras inside had been deactivated in 2014, 2 years before the facility shuttered. It was as if the envelope had simply appeared. Forensic audio analysts confirmed that the voice belonged to Tom Nichols. Facial analysis software matched bone structure and skin markers with a 97.8% likelihood. And yet, even with official confirmation, there were no answers, no coordinates, no suspects, no proof of who, or what, had followed him from Devil's Lookout that day. Tom's family was offered possession of the original tape. Julie declined. Instead, she asked that it be stored in public archive, accessible to any family who has ever searched the woods and found only silence in return. The final investigative report, declassified in late 2024, ended with an unusually human conclusion. The subject of this case did not die from accident, misadventure, or environmental cause. His final message suggests coercion, surveillance, and psychological distress, consistent with long-term isolation and possibly capture. We are not prepared to speculate further. This file is closed. Closed after 12 years. And yet, what followed was not closure, not in the way families hope for, with remains, with rituals, with finality. Instead, Tom Nichols became a kind of symbol, not of tragedy, but of awareness. His disappearance triggered legislative pressure to overhaul how backcountry disappearances are tracked, leading to the Nichols Protocol, adopted in 2025 by federal search agencies. It included mandatory GPS beacon registration, ranger station footage retention, and a cross-agency missing persons task force for wilderness areas. Hikers still leave coins on Devil's Lookout now, not in tribute, but as signal. A way of saying, I was here. I came back. I left this for the one who didn't. Every year, on June 4th, Julie returns to the ridge. She no longer gives speeches. She no longer brings flyers. She no longer asks for help. She brings a flask of hot coffee, one of Tom's favorite trail journals, and a small battery-powered tape player. She plays his last words aloud, one time, to the trees, and then she sits, waiting, not for him to answer, but in case whoever followed him ever does again. Some stories don't resolve. Some voices echo across years, through leaves and shadows and unmarked cabins in forgotten places. Tom Nichols left us something rare, not just a record of vanishing, but proof that, for a moment, he fought to be seen. In a world that often loses track of its quietest people, that alone is enough to shake the ground beneath us. Share this story. Keep his name alive. Remember the ones who walked into silence and spoke anyway.